Good morning, everyone. I am Lee Wolf from Teaching and Learning, and I'm very honored to have the opportunity to introduce you to Dr. Punya Mishra. If you Google Punya Mishra, you'll see a nice summary, now done by AI, highlighting his tens of thousands of citations, mention of him being in the top 2% of scientists worldwide, that he's a recipient of numerous awards, creator of ambigrams, director of the Learning Engineering Institute at Arizona State University, and co-creator of the TPAC framework, which has been described as the most significant advancement in the area of technology integration in the past 25 years. I've been lucky to know the man behind the accolades for almost 20 years now, and can tell you that what truly sets Punya apart is his ability to see connections where others see boundaries. In a field often divided by technologists and humanists, Punya is a bridge builder who can speak both languages fluently, usually while making an obscure cultural reference that will have you Googling and bookmarking during the keynote. While he may work in the proverbial ivory tower, he does not look down from there. He loves engaging with people and ideas, be it physics, political science, philosophy, poetry, or any other discipline starting with a P or A through Z. He not only believes education can change the world, but walks the walk by cultivating spaces where diverse disciplines can converge to address our most pressing educational challenges. Over the next 45 minutes, you're in for a treat, but I can tell you, while Punya relishes in giving a good keynote, one-way conversations are not his preferred mode of communication. He sees this talk as the beginning of a conversation. So as your mind is sparking and you're Googling during the talk, please have questions ready. We'll have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end, but he will be around with us for the whole afternoon, so be sure to pull him aside during coffee breaks and after the session for a chat. So with that, I welcome Dr. Punya Mishra.
Working? No? Yes? Can you hear me in the back? All right. Thank you, Lee, for the introduction. Thank you. That's very meaningful to me. Thank you also for inviting me here this morning. I'm really excited to be here. As mentioned earlier, the innovative futures and engaging learners. I think an important theme for all of us who work in higher ed. And since Lee talked about knowing me for the past 20 years, here are some pictures from our times together with the dates. It was good fun going through Google Photos. That's her graduating. That was a time when Obama came to campus, where I took my kids out of school. That was a very different political time, as you can imagine. This was the last time that we met, was June 2023, just before, I think, or you had already moved here, I think. But what I want to point out is, like, as a really good friend, she forgot to tell me that I had something stuck in my teeth with that photograph. But this is one of the first times I used AI to actually remove that and also put us in the Grand Canyon. Like, if I can remove crud from my teeth, I can also take us all to the Grand Canyon. But as Lee mentioned, this is my contact information. I do reply to every email I get. It might take me a while, but I will. So please get in touch. Almost everything that I do. Yes.
I think your mic probably isn't on. Would that be fair? Just your personal mic? Yeah. We can hear you well, but not fully amplified.
Is this
Yeah.
there? There we go. Are we good?
That was the higher as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Should be better now.
Thank you. Better? All right. Almost everything that I do, I share publicly on my website. I'm a pretty avid blogger, so like literally maybe more than what you need, but it's all there. In terms of my background, I have a background, undergraduate degree in engineering, went into wanting to be a filmmaker to do educational film. Ended up in education. Most of my work is in ed tech, creativity, design, and I sort of consider myself an educational systems designer rather than a researcher per se or a professor, because I think what we are engaged in is creating the systems that allow people to succeed. And I've, a parent and also been a school board member when I was in Michigan, so have had a chance to look at education and learning from a whole variety of different perspectives. And so talking about innovative futures, engaging learners, I'm going to just share some stories, and through that, try to get at what are some things that are important for me, from personally, that I have come to sort of recognize as being critical. So this is India. I was born in that little place with that little dot with the A, but lived my early childhood in this place called Mizoram, which is a tribal state in the northeast part of India. And the interesting thing about Mizoram is almost all the kids I know are obsessed, at least when I was growing up there, with comic books, and particularly Western cowboy comics. And everybody could draw really well. And I remember because of peer pressure, trying to draw cowboys, and they would draw these cowboys on horses riding into the sunset, and mine were horrible. And people used to make fun of me for that, right? So then as it happened, my father got transferred to New Delhi. So I started going to, this is the school that I started going to there, and nobody there draws or sketches. And suddenly I became the artist. People would be like, did you see Punya? He's so good. His cowboys are so good. And what that meant is that I started seeing the world around me. I started getting art, literally, sketching books. I started seeing things in the world around me and saying, oh, how can I draw that? And I used to doodle and sketch all the time. So what does that mean for us, all of us who are involved in education? It means that talent is contextual. I often wonder if my father had not transferred from Mizoram to Delhi, if I'd have had this career and life that I've had, because this idea of art and being able to express myself visually and so on is a critical part of who I am. So when we think about talent, when we often think about whether this student has talent or not, recognize that maybe, just maybe, it is the context that is preventing us from seeing something that might be there, right? So growing up, I was obsessed with reading. I would read anything and everything, art, science, math, you name it, poetry, cinema, film. I was just interested in everything. But in India, if you're good in science and math, you will end up going either becoming a doctor or an engineer. So I ended up going to the engineering degree program in this institution. And I like to call those 4 years of my life as the 4-year transformation. I went from an 18-year-old who was I was literally writing limericks about special theory of relativity sitting in a physics class. And 4 years of that educational system just beat me down. The emphasis on exam after exam, the emphasis on just rote memorization, no interest in if I understood anything, no interest in that I could take these ideas and apply them somewhere else, none of that. And so at the end of 4 years, I honestly regarded myself as a failure. I felt I had wanted to be a scientist. I was like, no, I can't do that. I'm not good at that. But again, the thing here is, I think it's made me a better educator. It's made me a better educator because when I look at that one student in the back of the class who was dozing off or not paying interest, the fault maybe is mine. The emphasis, the pressure is on me for not being able to connect with that student because I was that student, right, through those 4 years. And so it has given, and I think as educators, we need to really think about having this empathy for a sense of responsibility towards those who are falling through the cracks. And we all know that. I mean, as we wouldn't be educators if we didn't care about that. So 4 years of this, I was like, okay, what do I do? And by then, of course, I had this idea that I'm good at the arts for some reason. So I said, okay, I'm going to make educational films. So I ended up joining the master's program at the Industrial Design Center in Visual Communication because obviously I was artistically gifted because my father had transferred to New Delhi, when I was 10 years old. And that's there where I met this guy. This is the old Macs, if you remember, with the floppy disk where you had to pull things in and out. And suddenly I felt that something interesting was going to happen at this intersection of technology, its ability to represent ideas visually, interactively, and so on. And I don't know how many of you remember this program called HyperCard. I'm aging myself here, but it was a fabulous piece of software. And before that, I actually had programmed using punch cards when I was in my undergrad. Having something like this, which allowed me to write short snippets of code and make things happen on screen, was extremely powerful. But as important was the community that Industrial Design Center had. These are some of the faculty who are extremely transformative. I'm in touch with a couple of them even today. And these were my friends and colleagues. And if you see, that's me. I used to have hair one point in time, and I was so arrogant about it that I would shave it off every year till I realized it's not coming back. And to the right of me over there is who is currently my wife. So we met over there too. But the point here is that in just 3 months, from May, it should say 1988, I'm sorry, that's a typo, from May to August of 1988, I went from somebody who saw themselves as being a failure and couldn't do anything, to feeling that I had found an intellectual home, I had found a family and a community, and a history and a tradition that I could be a part of. So let's think about that for a second. Could something significantly would have changed in me in 3 months? No. What changed was the institutional structure, the community, the system around me. And that was enough. And so I'll have this key takeaways. So one was about talent. The second one is the importance of belongingness and identity in what we do. That our students, so 4 years in engineering, I never really saw myself as an engineer. I was learning to be an engineer. Within 3 months of being at Industrial Design Center, I started calling myself a designer, and I still call myself that today. I didn't say I'm learning design. I'm still learning design, 30 years on, right? So if you take a baby and you're like a little kid and you're teaching them swimming, if you ask them, like, yeah, I am a swimmer. They don't say I'm learning swimming. They say I am a swimmer, even though if you leave them alone, they most probably will drown. Right? But the identity is that of being a swimmer. And I think that in education, very often we miss that aspect of how important it is to develop this identity. So with this idea of bringing design to education, went to Illinois Urbana-Champaign to get my PhD. And when I was there, one day I was just reading a book on creativity, and there was a throwaway line which said there are 400 different representations of the periodic table of elements. And I said, that's garbage. I know that's what Mendeleev came up with, sitting in a train. That's the truth with a capital T. And I start digging. And one of the best parts of being in an university is you have amazing library resources. So 6 months of my life, I started reading about this. And these are all these different representations that chemists have created. They're still creating new ones. But we don't give students, for some reason, access to this. We say, that's the truth, that's the one that goes on the wall, that's the one that goes in a textbook. And the other interesting thing is, if you see there's a group of elements that sits below that, that you take the actinides and lanthanides out of it. And why does that happen? Because we didn't want to print these long pages, so it's a technology of print, which actually constrains the way we represent the periodic table of elements. Okay? So I said, now that we have, this was the early days of the web, so I'm talking about 1996, 97, I designed this piece of software called FLIPS, Flexible Learning in the Periodic System, which now allowed you to zoom in and out. We were not constrained by the rigidity of print. We could now see these different representations and how they relate to each other. So it gave you a very different way of thinking about the periodic table of elements. In fact, I started not calling it the periodic table, but calling it the periodic system. And the Mendeleev's table is one representation of that system. So here's a takeaway from there. That the intentional design of learning artifacts, that bringing together the science and the art and craft of learning theories, subject matter expertise, and the affordances of technology. That one can do really powerful things if we bring these together. It's not just the technology by itself. It's not just having the right theories and so on, but it's that intersection, bringing that together. Ended up going to Michigan State University, where I started doing, this is the first time I really started working with teachers more closely, and this idea of teachers as being designers of the kinds of processes and experiences that students have, right? So thinking of technology not as a given, but rather as something that I can take and manipulate and change for my particular need, my particular context. This is where I met this guy. He's a very cool looking guy with sunglasses, cool even without sunglasses. Matt and I go back a long way. If you look us up, if you Google me, his name will pop up and vice versa. And we had an incredibly productive sort of
scholarly partnership, which led to something that Lee had mentioned, the TPAC framework, which is basically arguing that the kinds of knowledge teachers need to have to successfully integrate teaching has to combine the technology that you're thinking about, but as importantly, the content that we're thinking about and the pedagogical approach that you use. So, a trivial example would be something like if you want to learn the names of the capitals and of countries and currencies of countries, well, flashcards are the way to go because that's the best way to do it with some timed random repetition maybe. But if you want students to become better writers, then maybe there is some system of peer review, whether it's a wiki or a blog or something that way that you need to start thinking about. So the nice thing about, I think we timed this right. It gave us a lot of citations, which is great. But more importantly has been, I think, the impact of the framework on the field. I don't think there's a single teacher education or teacher preparation program in the world today where the TPAC framework is not in some shape or form used. And that's, when I think about it, sometimes Matt and I used to sit on the 5th floor of this building called Erickson Hall, bouncing ideas together and then coming up with something that is influential to the field is very deeply personally meaningful. So the takeaway here, I think, is an interesting one, which is when I wonder about why did this framework take off, part of it is because it was deeply recognized the importance of practitioner expertise. It put the educator at the center and said they understand. If you look at the larger dotted circle outside, that's context. That what educators truly know is the context within which they work, the students that they're working with. And so it recognizes and respects that and builds the framework out of that. And I think that's a big part of why this was successful. That's also a takeaway that any kinds of frameworks and stuff we come up with cannot be driven by anything else but putting educators and learners at the center of it and their expertise. As you go ahead in academia, you start getting more sort of leadership opportunities. So Lee and I co-directed the Masters in EdTech program for a bunch of years. And that's where you start thinking more about going from, as a teacher, I can go into a classroom and create an environment, right? Create an experience. Like, what does that mean at the level of a program? How do you manage, how do you create a vision for a program, or as you were talking about the level of the university, that has this, that consistency of vision and so on. And thinking about John Dewey's point that all learning comes through experience, but not all experiences are equally important. And so these are some examples of the work that we did. This is in Chicago. It's one of the best work I've done working with K-12 educators in Chicago. And at the core of it, I think, where was this paper that Dewey had written about sort of the 4 primary impulses for learning. And he had talked about it in terms of children, but I think that this applies across the age levels. That what we are motivated by is our 4 sort of primary things. 1, wanting to know something, like to understand. So that's inquiry. We ask questions of the world. The second, we love to build things. And a build something doesn't necessarily mean a physical artifact. It could be a scientific theory. It could be a poem. It could be a sketch. Doesn't matter. We like building things. We like talking and communicating with each other. We like sharing our ideas with each other. We like our ideas being pushed around by others, and that communication piece. And finally, everything that we do, we bring a sense of personal expression to it. We bring ourselves to it. And I think that's really important. I think as educators, one of our close friends, Dana Henriksen, she did a study on sort of highly creative teachers. And the title of her dissertation says it all. It says, "We teach who we are." Right? So we bring ourselves to this work in ways that is critically important. And so the takeaway from this one is that these 4 impulses need to be a part of that this is where you leverage creativity and aesthetics to make these powerful transformative sort of programs, not just individual courses or classes, but actual programs. So far I've talked about, the issue of talent. I've talked about sort of the designing of artifacts and processes and experiences. But increasingly sort of coming to realize that working with teachers, however fulfilling it was, and I still miss it, to be honest, that it didn't allow us to make change at the systems level. And that change at the systems level is really hard. Educational transformation is really hard. And so around 8 or 9 years ago, I moved to Arizona State University. We are really proud of the fact that we are #1 in innovation. If you ever come to Phoenix or Tempe, you will see we slap it on every bus and hoarding, just in case you wouldn't, didn't know that fact. We would force you to know it. But what it honestly allowed me to do is work at a much larger scale than I could have. This is an example of a large-scale high school design activity that we were a part of, working with students, teachers, community members, business leaders, together to imagine what high school could be. I mentioned that I have a lot of citations and so on, and Lee mentioned that as well, and that's all, any bio of mine will always talk about that. But if you ask me, the thing that I'm most proud of is the fact that there is a school today in a neighboring school district that took 2 years of working in collaboration with the school, with the community, that gives a very different experience of what school can be for kids. We literally broke down walls, took 4 or 5 classrooms, came up with a completely new model for how adults work with kids. So it's not a one teacher with one classroom, it is an array of teachers, one educational designer, some lead teachers, and a lot of interns. It's very transparent to the community. Parents can walk in and out anytime they want. A very different model for what school can be, and something I'm incredibly proud of. At the same time also, I was associate dean at the university, so sort of developing systems for faculty to starting to think about the future of learning and teaching in new ways, right? So working with speculative fiction authors and bringing in academics to have these conversations together, thinking about the issues of climate change in education, starting a couple of webinars and podcasts. The Silver Lining for Learning, we started that in March of 2020 when a few friends, we got together and said, schools have shut down. What does this mean? Let's talk to some people, and it's going strong. 5 years. No funding, nothing. It's just 5 of us. We meet every Saturday and we talk, and we get guests from all around the world. It's been one of the most educative experiences I've ever had. The Learning Futures podcast was one where it was a way of showcasing the work that our faculty were doing at the college. So again, building systems not just to support our faculty, but also to promote the work that they're doing. And so thinking about design and education, this is what I had come to the US to do PhD for. And one thing, if you look, I'm sort of giving this narrative of my life so far, at some point, but also speaking about the places, the spaces within which design plays a role. So if you think about what we design artifacts. They may be textbooks, they may be apps, they may be software, they may be whatever it may be, right? We design processes because you could have the same artifact, but how we use it can be very different. Those would be something like lesson plans and, syllabi, curriculum maps. But you could give 2 teachers the same syllabus, the same curriculum map or something, and the experience of the learner would be very different. So we are also, as importantly, designing these experiences. That takes the affective, the creative aspect of teaching into play. And finally, we are also working at the level of systems and culture. Because if those 2 don't align with whatever else you're doing, it's not going to work. Right? And so thinking about design as playing out across all 5 of these spaces. And so if you look at going from flips to TPAC to stuff, and then the design of the school, you're sort of seeing that whole thing play out. And so takeaway here is that when we are thinking about making any kind of sort of transformational design for education, that we have to think across all 5 of these spaces. Because you could be thinking in terms of systems and culture, but you don't have the right tools and you're not thinking of the right experiences that your faculty or your learners could have, it's not going to work. All right, so this is a point where we sort of sum up, because I'm going to do a transition here. So key takeaway, we talked about talent being contextual, importance of belongingness and identity, intentional design, the importance of homegrown frameworks, right, which respect the wisdom, the practical wisdom or knowledge that practitioners bring on designing, that these transformative experiences are based on these 4 impulses, and thinking about systems and culture. So this is me, let's say, 2022. If you'd asked me to give a talk in 2022, this is what I'd be done and say, this is it. And then this happened. We didn't ask for it, we didn't know what it was, and boom, there it is, and everybody's like, AI is here. But AI has been with us for a long time at some level, but even in the, all these devices and apps that we use, if you use Facebook or Alexa or all of these have some form of, Google search, page rank algorithms, all of that. But something changed with the arrival of ChatGPT, and now, of course, you have all these other creatures sort of hanging around. And the first response was, oh my God, writing is dead. This is the end of education as we know it. And then, of course, comes the backlash to the backlash, which is, oh, we need to transform education. Educational systems are not ready for the world of AI. We need to do this, we need to do that. We did a focus group with school leaders, and the title of our paper is, can we just please slow it all down? Because things are moving really fast. At least the news coming out of Silicon Valley makes it look as if things are moving really fast. And, there could be a huge gap between those things. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time because I think that people have a very deep misunderstanding of what this new generative AI technology is. And when I talk about AI, I will talk about generative AI. I will not talk about all other kinds of AI. I think that's really important to understand because I think the label AI has a whole bunch of different things under it, and we haven't been very smart about that. So thinking about what is generative AI, so first of all, what it is not. It is not a search engine, it is not a truth machine. I think that's really important to recognize. But what is it? So here's one way of thinking about it. So here is the reality of the world around us, nature, tables, chairs, people, all that kind of stuff. And we take it through our senses, not all of it, a certain part of it, and we build mental representations in our heads. We build scientific theories, we build poems, whatever. We talk to each other. And a subset of that gets represented externally, right? It gets represented externally in books that we write and poems and TikTok videos and whatever, right? Social media. The nice thing about this is that there is actually a loop here, which is like, if I say that if I drop something, it's going to fly off, you're going to come and drop something and it's going to drop to the ground. And the reality is going to slap me in the back of my head and say, your theory of things flying off doesn't work, right? So there is this sort of the cycle of your ideas being continuously tested by others and the world around it. Now, a subset of these external representations have been digitized, because of our Facebook posts and videos we have put out there and articles we've written on the web and so on and so forth. Most of it, of course, being what are known as weird, which is Western, industrialized, rich, educated, democratic. So huge sections of human artifacts have not been digitized. Now, what large language models are basically trained on that subset of the stuff that has been digitized, okay? So that's important to recognize. And as important to recognize is there is no connecting loop back to the real world. So it's basically representations. It's been trained on representations that have been digitized, that we have created. There is no connection back to the real world. So how does it work? So for instance, if you go to an LLM and you say the sky is, the LLM is going to say probabilistically which word makes most sense, and it'll say the sky is blue. And you're like, wow, this thing is smart. It knows that the sky is blue, except that the meaning doesn't matter, because I could type in cubicle stars drink, throw it to an LLM, and LLM is going to say probabilistically light, dust, blah, blah, whatever, and it's going to say, okay, cubicle stars drink light. And that sounds really poetic. Then you're like, wow, not only is this guy smart, it also is quite, understands metaphor and analogy and simile and whatever. Now, the thing is that just simply training them is not enough. There's a lot of work done by humans in taking the output, and there is a whole ethical issue that we can talk about data colonialism and all of that stuff that I'm not even going to get into. I'm not even going to get into the environmental aspects of the use of these large language models, right? That's a completely different talk, and we can have a conversation about that. But there's a human loop involved in sort of looking at the output and saying this is not good, this is not good, this is okay, and that training is there. What's amazing though, and this is what is surprising, and this is what surprised I think all of us, so far we've been used to computers as like, it's an algorithm. You give it an input, it'll always give you the same output. LLM sort of flip that. Computers where you take numbers, it'll give you more numbers. What LLMs do is that they lack substance because they have no correlation to the real world, but they're really good at style. And I think people were not prepared for that. I was not prepared for that. And I think most people, even in the industry, were not prepared for that. That it can write a sonnet about mathematics That was not something we ever thought computers could do. But just by virtue of throwing in a lot of data, some really smart algorithms to build these models, it starts doing things like that. I think that's really important to recognize. The other thing people often talk about is that how do we reduce hallucination, which is the stuff that it makes things up. The thing is, the way these models operate is that they hallucinate. Hallucination is their modus operandi. They are probabilistic statistical machines which will do the next prediction. By definition, that's stuff that's making up as you go along. So if anybody tells you we can guardrail this, forget that. We can reduce it, we can tighten it, but it'll always, because that's core to what this technology is, which is why its outputs are incredibly variable. You can ask the same question in all caps and not, you might get slightly, you will get different answers. You can ask the same question over and over again, you will get slightly different answers because it's making up the answer every time out of whole cloth. I think that's incredibly important to recognize. So my friend Leon first says, chatbots don't make sense, they make words. I think that's really important to recognize. I think that's a very insightful sort of an idea. But as I was talking about this emergent properties, so here is one that I tried. It's very early on. GPT had just come out. I said, write a proof of the infinity of primes, which is Euclid's proof of the infinity of primes, but leave a subtle error in the proof for the student to find. And literally after back and forth a few times, it wrote a poem. You know, quality of poetry we can argue about, but it had the proof, so it had to, quote unquote, understand the proof, quote unquote, understand what poetry was, but also understand the kinds of errors humans make to insert that error, because I found websites, math websites, which make the same error. And so this is how I found. Like if a human could do that in seconds, I would think they're super duper smart, right? And to do this in multiple languages and in seconds and do it over and over again, that's crazy. Here's another one. Can you tell me what this is a picture of? Excuse me? So this is a picture of the ground taken during a solar eclipse. And so the gaps between the leaves act as tiny pinhole cameras and you see little eclipses on the ground. Okay? I gave this to ChatGPT, and I did this again a couple of days ago. And it said that it figured out that it was taken during an eclipse. In fact, in the latest version, I said, this was in the 1990s, where do you think the photograph was taken? It identified 4 eclipses across the world. And then I said, my name is Punya Mishra, does that help? And it said, oh, looking up Punya Mishra from your bio, you in an Urbana-Champaign doing your PhD in the 1990s. I did this day before yesterday. Okay? And so the chances are that this was taken on May 10th, 1994. It's like, wow. I mean, the entire transcript of this is on my website. I mean, you can go read it. Now, gave it this one. This is a classic optical illusion. You might, how many of you see the red circle on the right-hand side is looking bigger? Yeah, but they're the same size. You know that. So I give this to which red circle is bigger, and it's like, both are the same size. This is the classic Ebbinghaus illusion. I'm like, okay, really good. And then LLMs are smart. Then I gave it this one. I said, which red circle is bigger? And it said, both red circles are of the same size. I'm like, what happened here? Right? What's going on? You know what's going on? They're just seeing a pattern. They're seeing a circle with other circles. Like, oh, this is Ebbinghaus. That's it, done. The latest reasoning model, I said, you are wrong. It went and wrote some code, computed it, and still got it wrong. And I said, you're still wrong. And finally got it right. I don't know if it really got it right or wanted to just please me. No way of knowing. So I said, you try this one. Create a photorealistic image of 5 clock faces, all showing the time as 6:30. 10:10. So no surprise that we get results like this. And the smarter, better models are actually getting worse. So LLMs are smart and they're drunk. But they're also very confident. So I said, draw me a periodic table to teach inorganic chemistry versus organic chemistry. It gave me 2 garbage tables. This is my favorite one, diagram of the ENT system. And said, this should be very useful for educational purpose in a medical or biology class. this is surreal what it has come up with, but so well rendered, but supremely confident. So LLMs are smart, drunk, and supremely confident. Now let's talk about bias. So Melissa Ward, who's a former student of mine at New Mexico State University, amazing scholar, you should look her up. So did this work where we took the student essays and we said one same essay and said written black family versus white family, gave it to the LLM. Surprise, surprise, the scores were pretty much the same. You were like, wow, maybe these things are not biased. But then we changed the prompt and it said comes from an inner city school versus an elite private school. Boom. So they have guardrail. This is where the human in the loop comes in. They have guardrail against explicit racism. But these models are implicitly racist, which is infinitely more scary when you think about it. This is the best one that we have done. 2 passages, exactly the same, about a student, 8th grade student essay about preparing for like homework or exams or something like that. 1 word was changed. Rap was changed to classical, and that was enough to change the behavior of almost every large language model, both in terms of scores given, lower scores given to the student with rap, but also in terms of the feedback given, where the feedback given to the student with the word rap in it was simpler at a lower cognitive complexity level than the other one. AI has a hotness problem where if you take an image, if I try this sometime, I've tried this where I took a picture of me and said, replicate this image, and it would make me this really good looking, slim guy. And I'm like, no, I'm Indian. Face should be rounder. Would never do it. This is a picture, school in India, and AI's representations of it. When you think about issues around body image and so on, you realize how crazy that is. So if there's one thing I wanted to take away about this is this, which is chatbots are smart, drunk, biased, supremely confident interns. So now you have an intern with you 24/7 who's supremely, it's good. I mean, as long as you know that once in a while it's going to make stuff up, it's going to be biased, it's okay. But I think the power of these tools is crazy as well, that we can do so much with just natural language. This is a simulation. You can go play with it on my website. It's honestly one of the best simulations connecting the Pythagorean theorem to the unit circle to sound and light that I have seen. And I did it in 1 afternoon. I don't know how to code in JavaScript. I don't know any of that. You can actually see it. It's actually quite beautiful. It shows you the Pythagorean theorem as sort of it's playing. A whole variety of simulations that I have created. Again, I don't know how to code. But I know what the science is there, that the final result should be. That's the important thing. Some really creative outputs, like music that I've created, songs. I have no musical talent whatsoever. Ghalib is Indian 19th century poet, favorite poet. I always felt that if he had lived today, he would be a heavy metal artist. So I have a heavy metal version of one of my Ghalib's favorite ghazals. I think it's wonderful. The other thing that I've been working on is this partnership or collaboration with AI. So these are some typographical things that I create. And then AI helps me write the poetry that goes with it. So this is periodic table manners, so periodic table and table manners. And look at the poem that AI came up with. Chemistry is complex, but etiquette is elemental. Both require measured responses to avoid explosive results. Isn't that good? And so we go back and forth. It's not like this is what AI came up with, but I give the design. Oh, this is one of my favorite ones. So you see Om, atomic bomb, and look at the end. That's just lovely. I have just recently posted a whole video of these interactions with Claude. So in terms of the fundamental challenge, of AI, is that learners are sitting in this corner. They don't know the technology and they don't know the field, because this thing hallucinates. A large part of our cognitive effort is that judgment and that expertise that we bring. Like experts who know AI sit in the right top corner. Most of us who are experts in a certain domain sit in, bottom right over there. And so the role of how much time do I have, Lee? 5 minutes? So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Let me see. So I want to spend a little bit of time taking the long view of this technology. It's because, often we talk here about people saying AI is just a tool. There is this sort of, you need to add it to your toolkit, otherwise you'll get left behind. The underlying idea that all these tools that we use are somewhat neutral, but media are really objects that we think with, and they change how we think. And so if you think about an oral culture, it emphasizes memory. If you think about print, if you think about what we academics value is citations. What does citation mean? It means knowledge is of the form that is somewhere solid that I can point to. That's an artifact of print. An oral culture won't have citations. Oral culture will be based on trust and word of mouth, right? So these technologies change. So, I've been writing these really fun things about an academic looking at mass-produced books and saying, oh my God, my world is going to be transformed forever. But I think more important than that is that these media, they are not neutral with respect to how we think and so on. So I'm looking at 2007 and 2008, thinking of the Arab Spring and being very positive, like, oh, this is the next Gutenberg revolution, democratization of knowledge, not realizing that Facebook and Twitter can be weaponized, right? That this thing of how many likes I can get is like a slot machine in your pocket, and that there is an underlying system and evolving culture of advertising and engagement that's going to transform the world that we live in. This is a headline from 2 days ago. Like, I can't make this stuff up, right? And so we know this impact on social media and youth mental health, and recognizing that then technological change is not additive, it's ecological. And I think a lot of the discussion around AI, when we focus on what's happening in our classrooms, we are forgetting the bigger picture of what AI could be doing to our thinking and to our society. And so technology may or may not change what happens in a classroom. There's this quote from Edison about like film is going to transform education. Whether or not film transform education, film transform the world within which education exists. And I think that's the kind, and I feel personally that when social media came along, I did not pay attention to those broader social impacts. And I don't want to be that person 10 years from now looking back and say, I didn't think about this when it came to AI. And I'm going to skip forward a little bit because I think I did my timing all wrong. All right, so one of the things that this technology is, like I said, it's dialogic. We have conversations with it. And there's enough research to show that when a technology of this nature, we will form social relationships with it. We will see it as a psychological other. There's increasing evidence that this is actually being designed to be that way. So this idea of artificial intimacy and how it exploits our social brains is something I've been writing a lot about. So if you're interested in that, please go to my website. This is something I have been writing a lot. And the evidence for that is getting stronger and stronger, that these companies are deliberately designing this for increased engagement and so on. So this is, 14th of March. This is from, these are all within the last 2 to 3 weeks headlines, right? So you combine this hallucination with deliberate design to engage and suck you in. Companies like Character AI, Replica AI, which are connected with all. Character AI is connected with Google, though Google sort of maintains a one-arm distance from it. Meta is leaning into this heavily. So this is a quote from the American Psychological Association saying that Character AI and Replica keep users engaged for as long as possible so that their data can be mined for profit. And this is a quote from a person who is on the board of Character AI, and it's saying that when a world where data is limited, because AI needs data. They're out of the internet. That's done. All of that has been sucked in, right? So what do? Like, you engage and you are giving them data continuously. In the last year, AI went number one. Use of AI was generating ideas, and the top 3 now are therapy, companionship, organizing my life, and finding purpose. And we know that social media has already altered human connections through isolation and echo chambers. And what does it mean to live in a world where, and again, it is also the underlying economic system. If early on in the internet we had gone for a penny for subscription kind of a system, I think we'd have a very different internet because we would be the clients. Right now we are not, right? The advertising companies are the clients. I think that's really important to understand. And so what does it mean to build these social relationships? What will it mean for the world that our students will be living in, that we will be living in? I mean, I'm as guilty of it as anybody else. I post something on LinkedIn and I just get 2 likes in a day, and I'm like, maybe next time I should try to push the boundary a little bit. Like, so I think this urge to blame them, these kids today, no, us. This is tapping into human impulses of engagement and performativity or whatever it may be, right? And we haven't even talked about sort of deep fakes and misinformation and so on. And so I wrote this rant once months ago. I got really angry because whenever I talk to educators, I hear everybody talking about ethics. How can we use ethically and so on? But who gave the companies, these AI companies, the right to do this global experiment with a technology which honestly is not ready for prime time? And again, I use it every day. I get it. I think it's really powerful. So I think we just need to, again, I'm not saying don't use it. I'm not saying any of that. Let's think about what this is and what are the best uses of it. I think it's a really great creativity partner. It just is not a great, truth teller. So let's keep it that way. We all have friends who are a little hallucinatory, and they're great friends just because of that. Let's keep it that way. So these are sort of the tenets that we are thinking about, and I think the important one is technological change is ecological in nature. And AI doesn't care about the truth. AI doesn't care, honestly, right? We do. And I think that's really important for us to keep in mind. All right, 30 seconds. So this was, the motto of Facebook, move fast and break things. And they're still doing that, honestly. Like the futurism article, the Wall Street Journal article that I mentioned here, you really have to read it. But I think that's not the way we should be thinking. As educators, we always do this. We move intentionally to nurture things. And I think this technology is here. It's really powerful. I mean, I really enjoy some of the things that I can do with it. Those poetry ones are an example. That's just a creative fun. I mean, I can spend hours. I love that typographical stuff. And now I have this partner who both gives me ideas for words. And then I create the design. And then we work together what the poetry is going to be. Whether it's great or not, I don't know. That's somebody else to determine. I really enjoy it. So that's a very deeply personal thing, right? So if you think about like the 4 Deweyan impulses, all 4 are covered. Inquiry, communication, construction. That's great. But I see a lot of uses of this or of its way of transforming society that we need to be thinking about much more. So I think it's through that hopefully we can leave things better than we found it. Thank you so much. Okay, time-wise?